So my name is Mick Seidel, and I'm going to come from just a little bit different angle on our honor of Joey. My wife and I lived for 20 years across the street from Dean and Carolyn, and we count them as one of our closest friends. And so we watched the girls grow up, and in the process, we got to know Joey. And so I have two things to say. First of all, I'm a lifelong Packer fan, and I'm going to speak from that standpoint. I'm also going to speak from the standpoint of a very dear friend of Dean and Carolyn. First, as a Packer fan, it's easy for me to be a Packer fan because my wife and I grew up in Wisconsin. So how does a kid from South Dakota have such a passion for the Packers? And I think it speaks to Joey that he had such a passion, because the reason he liked the Packers is that they're owned by the fans, right? He liked the concept of a professional team being owned by the fans and became passionate for the Packers because of that. So because I'm a fan and because the team is owned by the fans, I get to be the chairman of the Packers today, and I get to declare tomorrow's game against Miami at Lambeau Field as Joey Williams Day. And so, as you know, one of the traditions when the team loses one of its fallen heroes is to place the initials on the jersey. So I've got the initials for Stacy, which I'd like to put on her lapel, and for Dean and Carol. So if they'd come up. I'll honor you with the... So now let me just talk about Dean and Carolyn just for a second. I don't know how many of, I don't know quite exactly how many of you know Dean and Carolyn as well as we do, but those of you who do know that Dean's a graphist, wonderful, wonderful man, but he's pretty picky about the men that were interested in marrying his three precious daughters. And I don't know how many times we'd cross the street when he was raking leaves, and he'd talk about these men that were interested in marrying his daughters, and I was thinking, Dean, you're pretty picky. And I'm sure Carrie and Dina would have something to say about all that. But the point of it is that we, of course, went to to Stacy's wedding and Joey's wedding, and you know, I had the impression that Joey had his work cut out for him, knowing how picky Dean was. And so it's in that spirit that I'd like to read you the email that I received on Monday with the shocking news of Joey's death from Dean. And he wrote to both myself and his law partner, who also happens to be from Wisconsin and is a lifelong Packer fan as well. So Dean writes to me on Monday, Mick and Todd, there is no joy among Packer fans today, only tears. My beloved son-in-law and fiercely loyal Packer fan, Joey Williams, died Saturday of a massive heart attack. As fellow cheeseheads and friends of Joey, I knew that you both would want to know. You both know how Joey lived life to the fullest. He packed more into his short 40 years with us than most people do in a lifetime of 80. Pray for his family. Joey's loss has left a huge hole in our hearts. Dean. And so I think in honor of Joey, we can say that he met every test there was, and they were high standards. And Dean, Penny and I, our heart goes out for your loss.
My I guess it's only fitting that I go next. Andy, I can assure you that the trick is on you and Joe, because you didn't marry up. You brought our Stacy and your beautiful wife up to your level. I have 3 beautiful daughters, and Joe was my first son. I thank Gary and Sue for sharing him with us. My grandson, Brady, said something rather profound to Stacy not too long ago. He asked his mother, when I get older, will I be able to chew gum and play in a rock band just like my dad? And yes, Brady, you can do it all. You can, in fact, do it all, because Joey's blood pounds through your heart. But the thing that I hope that you capture from your father was that he had the sensitivity of a poet. He was a man's man, packed into that gigantic, powerful body, but he had the sensitivity of a poet, and I know that's what Stacy saw in him. I do have a story to tell on a lighter note. And I could tell many stories. In fact, Stacy reminded me of the story of what it was like when Joe came over to ask my permission to marry Stacy, and I could go on for a half hour just on that one. But I'm going to skip past that to when Joey, because he desperately needed a hobby to take up his time, so he decided to rekindle his love affair with golf. You know, and I remember telling Carolyn, I looked at her and says, how is he going to do that? I mean, golf, you cannot play a round of golf in less than 6 hours. By the time you go out there, you warm up, you play a round of golf, then you have lunch and drinks afterwards. I mean, that's 6, 7 hours. How is he going to do that? Well, but he did. And he started by going to Golfsmith at lunch breaks and trying all the demo clubs there until he got just the right set. I'm quite certain that they finally just gave him clubs and said, please leave because you're wearing out everything that we have. So, I think it was a year ago, this last winter, when we had Joey and Stacy join us down in La Quinta, our place in the Palm Springs area, and to play golf. And I was lucky enough to play several rounds with Joey. Well, one in particular was the last day we played together, and so we picked the nicest course. And Joey made clear to me, this is the nicest course I've ever played, and he was so excited. We went to the first tee, and the starter took us over to the side, and he said, I really need a favor. And we said, well, what? And he said, well, these 2 husbands have dumped their wives off. They won't play golf with them, and there was a cancellation in your group, and would you please do me a favor and golf with these 2 women in our group? And one was like 65, and she was playing with her daughter-in-law that was like 35. And you know, we of course said sure. And so we teed it off with them, and they claimed to have had many, many lessons, but we saw no evidence of that. And of course, Joey was immediately encouraging every shot that they did make contact with the ball, and especially if it went straight. Joey was their biggest supporter, and he's cheering them on. And of course, by the 9th hole, he's like part of their family. So we get to the 12th hole, and there was a decorative pond immediately to the right of the tee box. And the 65-year-old gal she'd been having a tough day off the tee, and she shanked her shot. She barely made contact with the ball. It went dead right, and we could see it go over the grassy hill, and we knew there was water on the other side. And we were thinking it couldn't have gone more than 40, 50 yards. She barely made contact with the ball, and so Joey and I dutifully went with her to look for her ball.